Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here with you on a Wednesday. You know what? No more politics, at least for now. Okay? No more of those political ads. The election, yeah, just now in my ear. We're going to talk a little aftermath of politics in terms of what happens next. My point on that is now the campaign for president in 2 years kicks up again. So, yeah, you take a deep breath and we'll get going on that. But today, a completely different topic. We're going to be talking about medical malpractice as we do every month. You know, we open up the phone lines, invite you to join in the conversation. Again, the question to ask yourself this morning, do you or do you know someone who perhaps has a situation where they feel as though they were done wrong by a doctor or a hospital or some type of medical treatment? I think we all at one point or another may have gone to a doctor and walked out later wondering, did everything work out right? Is there a possible malpractice case? Maybe that hasn't happened to you if you're lucky, but you'd be surprised how many people it does. We've got an attorney on this morning, arguably one of the finest malpractice attorneys in the state, and there aren't a lot of them anyway. It's a very specialized field. Clint Kelly, good morning
to you.
It's good to have you on. Hey, true, question. Was I being accurate when I said that a lot of people, what percentage of the population do you think at one point or another might suspect that they have an issue with malpractice? Any guess on that, Clint? I mean,
small.
Very small. Now, does that mean malpractice is very rare, or is that they just don't suspect it?
I don't think malpractice is rare, because it is the third leading cause of death in America. I think it's that so few people either suspect it or want to do anything about it.
Did you say third leading cause of death?
Yes.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right, so third, and so I guess part of the problem here is I think still, and maybe it's changing a bit, you just go into a doctor instantly giving them credibility. Okay, you want to believe the doctor has your best interest at heart, you want to trust them, and you certainly defer to them. So is that why people just aren't going to be critical of them because they assume that he or she is going to do them right?
I think so, and I also think, particularly here in Tennessee, I think there's a natural reluctance to want to sue doctors and hospitals.
Because they think it's an overwhelming task, or why? Why would you?
It's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. It's personal. People don't want to believe that they've been the victim of malpractice. They want to believe they're going to get better. They want to believe their doctor's done everything the doctor's supposed to do, or the nurse, and so they decide to let it go. And then we talk about the statute of limitations. They let it go too long, and after a year, they call me up and say, do I have a case? And I'll have to tell them, I'm sorry, you waited too long. You know?
You say malpractice, okay, and there can be different degrees of it. Malpractice where it's a minor thing and there's really no damages. Maybe you're going to recover. They did something wrong. You're going to be okay. That's one thing. But just not wanting to pursue something, and you've had some incredible cases where there's been some incredible damage done. Why would you sit on something like that?
Well, again, there's a reluctance, particularly people here in Tennessee just don't like bringing these cases in general. And some people will just put up with unbelievable burdens just because they don't want to file a lawsuit against a doctor or hospital.
Okay, and a lot of people may say, you know, filing a lawsuit, that's expensive. How can I afford even a lawyer? That's where we get to the point again that Clint here will take your case.
And Nick, that's why I point out from time to time on the show, there is no malpractice lawsuit crisis in Tennessee. We've seen a steady, documented decline in cases that have been filed over the last 8 or 9 years to the point where they're just very rare. A lot of that's because of tort reform laws that have been passed specifically to do that. And the other part, like I told you, is because of this reluctance here in this state of people wanting to sue their doctor or hospital. So I want the public to know there is no crisis. If there's a crisis, it's that fewer people are being made whole or seeking compensation when they have a right to do so.
Well, I view you as someone too. The crisis is if they're not being held accountable, all right, that creates an issue for further harm.
Well, and for me and you, because the taxpayers will wind up picking up the tab. If people aren't going to the courts to get compensation from the wrongdoers, whether it's a hospital or a doctor or clinic, and they need further health care, that puts a burden either on us as taxpayers ultimately, but also on the health insurance companies who have to pick up the tab. for future health care treatment if someone's in a wheelchair or lost a limb. And so that's not fair. We as taxpayers shouldn't have to make up for someone else's wrongdoing, should we?
By the way, they don't pay you. You win, you get paid.
Correct.
I just want to be clear on that. It's called contingency, all right? Contingency. You still win sometimes?
Yeah.
I
wouldn't be in this business if I didn't.
know. Obviously, very successful, but you've been in this how many years now, Clint?
I'm going on my 25th year.
25th year. So in that time, a quarter of a century, you've seen things change, as you just described to me. And let's be clear, too, on this. There are a lot of attorneys out there, and it can be very competitive. Boy, someone was telling me the other day, for new attorneys graduating now, I mean, you've got the Belmont School of Law, okay? You've got Vanderbilt. You have the Nashville School of Law. You've got the fact that DUIs are down thanks to Uber and Lyft.
Right.
Not that you handle these types of cases. You also have marijuana cases down because of medical marijuana and that being legalized. And then the influx of new law graduates makes it more competitive. Is that true? Is it your observation? I know you're outside that realm being malpractice, your specialty, but I've heard it's very competitive out there.
Yeah, it is very competitive. But in my field, I'm board certified in medical malpractice.
I wanted you to clarify that.
And our field is very small. And part of it's because there are so few medical malpractice cases, Nick.
Right.
I mean, if there were more cases, there probably would be more lawyers handling these types of cases. But in this field in particular, we are a small fraternity of lawyers that handle these cases, and I think that's a good thing because we become experts in determining whether the case has merit and how to pursue the case for the best interest of the client.
Yeah, after 25 years, you have the reputation. Those are the cases you handle. You know, we have someone else come on, another attorney, Tim Takis, who's an elder care.
Yeah.
He has a niche, and he is, now there are other lawyers that can handle elder care things. Maybe other lawyers could handle malpractice, but it's not their specialty.
Tim is the specialist. He is the tip of the spear when it comes to elder law, and he's been doing it a very long time out of Hendersonville.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you devote yourself to a particular area of the law. You become one of the best, and when you become one of the best, that's the type of person that clients ought to go see.
Gotcha.
Not somebody they just pull off the web or necessarily see on TV who may be a law firm, you know, advertising out of Florida.
Right.
You know, it's knowing who the experts are, a lot of times by word of mouth, and you know, a lot of times by shows like this.
Right. All right, well, the number is 737-7587. Before we get to some calls, and they're already coming in, but join us. If you have a question, legal question along medical malpractice, think you may have a case, we can get to the heart of that now. But if you would, I just want to ask you, I haven't seen you in a month or so. Anything catch your eye lately? I always try to watch when I know you're coming on to see if there's any high-profile medical malpractice case anywhere in the country. I'm sure there's some. Has anything jumped out at you lately?
No, not in particular in the news, and we'll talk about this as we get through the show. There's three things that I'm seeing more and more often that disturbs me as a medical malpractice lawyer. I'm beginning to see a lot of medication errors that occur in the pharmacies and errors that occur in the hospital where the nurses give wrong medications to the patients.
Okay.
I'm seeing more and more operations on the wrong body parts and on the wrong people, and we talk about that obviously because we've talked about that before. And also doctors spending less time explaining the risks of procedures where patients are going into surgeries not really understanding what the risks are until after something bad happens. And then all of a sudden the doctor spends a lot of time discussing the risks. That's what we call a lack of informed consent. And I'm seeing that more, and that's probably a product of assembly line medicine. There's just doctors aren't spending as much time with patients.
When you talk about risks, though, I mean, there's risk to any type of surgery. Should the patient be asking, or how far does the doctor have to go to tell you what the risk is? Some surgeries, I guess, are more risky than others.
Correct.
Can you give me an example between, say, all right, knee replacement surgery? I view that as not being real risky, though there probably can. I guess brain surgery or heart surgery may be a little more risky. What's the difference?
Sure. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
There's a surgery called a TVAR surgery, which is to address someone who has a dissecting aortic aneurysm. That's a bleed in your aorta.
Okay. And
they put a graft, it looks like chicken wire inside to seal off that leak. All right. One of the most devastating risks of that surgery is paralysis. Because of the location where they put the graft in, it can compromise blood flow to the spinal cord. So every patient has to be told that paralysis is a risk. That's the standard of care. All doctors agree on that. I've got a case right now with a patient who was not told that and then wound up in a wheelchair after the surgery. And the first thing he tells me is if I had known I was going to wind up wheelchair bound, I would have never had this surgery, because there's alternatives to it.
I was going to ask you, because do they have a choice?
Yeah, I mean, you can take medications to deal with that. There are less invasive means of surgery to deal with it. So there are choices. But the patient has the right to control his or her body and make that choice. And you need to be making that choice with full knowledge so that the choice is voluntary.
So you could have a malpractice case if a doctor does not tell you that there is that kind of side effect or potential problem and it happens to you.
Correct.
As opposed to if the doctor goes in up front and says, listen, we do this surgery, we put the mesh in, there is a such and such chance of you being paralysis, and you say, doctor, I'm prepared to take the risk. That pretty much eliminates the chance of you suing, unless the doctor is just totally incompetent when he does it.
Correct. I mean, if
it protects the doctor if they tell you this.
It does. That's what
then
that's for.
Why the heck wouldn't the doctor do it?
Because
Lazy?
They're in a hurry.
Oh.
They're in a hurry, and in some instances they're dealing with patients who they just don't take the time and tell them because it's not worth their time. In some instances, the doctors rely on the nurses to write these things in consent forms so the patients can read them. Now, the problem with that is, give you an example, when you close on a house, do you read all the mortgage documents?
No.
When you buy software from Apple, do you read that large disclaimer that you have to click I agree on?
Of course not.
Of course not. But in medicine, it's even more important. When someone's going to cut on your body, you need to know what the risks are before you decide to let that surgeon cut.
I would just think, and I know you, if you or I go in for surgery like that, whether they offer it or not, one of my first questions is going to be, Doc, what's the risks? Now, I know not everyone's going to ask that, but I would ask. I was like, all right, we're going to do this. Can you tell me what the downside potential is? Doesn't that occur to most patients to ask that?
I think some patients just go in and are happy to get the treatment. Honest to God, Nick, they're just happy to get it.
My good friend Larry Britton years ago came on this very program. You know the legendary Larry Britton. And the doctor, we determined he needed to have bypass surgery. And based on guests that came on this show with doctors that he complained about sometimes, I go, you better come by my office today, Larry. Later that day he does, and he gets an EKG. Yeah, you need bypass surgery. He goes into the surgeon, and I remember asking him after the fact. I go, so Larry, how was it? He goes, well, I was in there, and the doc came in, and he sat down, and he was going to tell me all about it. I'm not good at imitating Larry, but anyway, my point is, the doc starts explaining the risks, and then Larry puts his hand up and goes, Doc, you done this before? He goes, yeah. You good at it? He goes, yeah. I don't need to know the risks, just get it done. He didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Probably not the best way to go. I mean, let them tell you what the risks are, but I think Larry had made up his mind, I'm going to have this done, which was the right thing.
There are occasions for that. I'm talking about primarily elective procedures where patients go and they have a procedure that's they're advised to have, but it's not an emergency or urgency, and so they agree to have the surgery and they don't know what all's involved in it.
Yeah.
Part of hopefully people seeing the show is learning that anytime you have an elective procedure, ask.
Yeah.
Just what you did, Nick. Yeah. Ask what the risks are so you don't find yourself being, in essence, bamboozled into a surgery that perhaps you didn't need or you didn't understand.
Great point. The great thing about this show and having you come on, Clint, I mean, we get calls, and I know you've gotten cases through this show before, but really what's most important, the vast majority of people watching probably don't have an active case they can pursue, but you're learning right now how to prevent it and what to do if it happens. So sit back, listen, but if you have a question, 737-7587, free legal advice. And that's pretty nice of you. We'll be back with more phone calls. Actually, we'll start our calls and more of our conversation with a malpractice attorney, Clint Kelly, right after this. Stay with us.